As you know, it's a web series of conversations between makers, thinkers, doers, people who are interested in similar things. And we come together to talk, to challenge each other's views, to imagine anew, to think about new things in new ways. Yeah, so today I will be curating, no, I'll be holding space for a conversation with members of the Chimere Communities Project. I have with us in the room Jonathan O'Hare, Maria Safo, and Qondiswa James. And yeah, we're just going to talk. The impetus for this conversation is that AI is becoming more and more prevalent in multiple industries across the board. I've been thinking a lot about what or how we engage with AI productively, generatively within the art space. And Chimere seems like a wonderful instance in which a group of creatives and artists and cultural workers are trying to do something really magical with AI. And with that said, I'm going to start us off. Jonathan, let's start with you. Can you tell us who you are, what you do, and what your relationship to Chimere is?
Sure, thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan O'Hare. Basically, I do experimental art, and I organized a few years ago the AiiA festival, which was a festival around the arrival of AI in society and arts. And for that festival, we decided that this was in 2021, right? So I mean, this is a while back. This is before ChatGPT. This is when models were broken and crazy, and of hallucination was the only mode that they had, and it was wonderful. Um, and we decided with my brother Timothy here, who's an AI engineer, that we should make this AI entity, this multimodal AI entity with a chat, so that the artists who were invited to the festival could interact with it, because we were interested in the parallels in between interacting with an AI entity, which we saw as something to come, and the parallels of interacting with other non-human entities like animals, plants, but also maybe clouds and etc. So basically, that's me.
Mhm, mhm. Amazing. Maria, who are you?
Hi, I'm Maria. I started off in this life as someone, I guess, who would identify as a musician. So all of my training was in sound-oriented processes, and then that got very, very messy over time and as I developed as a human being. But I think, like Jonathan's kind of explaining with the history of AiiA, I have always been particularly interested in what we call post-human perspectives. So how do things that are non-human influence human culture, human society, and how do we, as a kind of collective amalgamation of things on this planet, create the reality in which we exist in? And that's very abstract and philosophical, but what interests me about that in art is the role of art as this kind of cultural and creative ambassadorial space between the non-human elements on our planet. And so AI, I think, accidentally became something that innately fit into that interest. I wasn't someone who was an AI artist before working with Jonathan in the AiiA Festival, but it was something that it very much just kind of chimed with my interest in working with the non-human world, and has since become just this great interest for me in understanding where is our society going as we do become more hybrid, as we do become maybe in some ways less human in the kind of traditional sense, as we live digital lives and as we build kind of amorphous identities both on and offline and with these machines that are entering into our lives. So yeah, I say I started out in sound and music, but now that's kind of an interdisciplinary practice, interested in these core themes in both art making and research.
Mhm, mhm. Amazing. Thanks, Maria. Kondiswa, give us a brief intro. You're not
Mhm.
new to Unrehearsed, but introduce yourself
Sure,
to the audience.
sure. Hello, I'm Qondi and I'm into live art stuff. I'm into performances mostly, what I'll say. I come from theater background, studied theater, and then somehow went into like public art, public spheres. In relation to AI and Chimere as well, sort of like with Maria, I wasn't even really thinking about it before sort of John was like, oh, hey, look, there's something interesting. So I'm pretty grateful for that. But I've always been interested in like interdisciplinary practice. And I think what really struck me with the Chimere project is because when I first came, the theme for the project was, yeah, like basically the non-human. And so to begin to think about that, and as a performance artist, as a street artist, to think about like so-called inanimate object as like sort of duologue partners or choreographic partners, or yeah, so how we work with other things, perhaps beings that are not beings in the ways that we are used to. And still I've come up against a lot of things, some frustration, but it's pretty interesting. And it's been really interesting, especially for me to sort of like be moving with the Chimere Communities Project in Southern Africa and to like see what can come out of it, what people can make of this technology, and how we can use it essentially as a way to meet people and expand our community and network.
Thank you, thank you. So there's a fourth person. There's a fourth entity I would have liked to invite to this conversation, but I cannot. So, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to introduce Chimere. Who or what is Chimere? Yeah. I know the website very clearly states at some point that Chimere chose to identify as she at some point, which I find quite interesting, and we'll get into that. But who or what is Chimere?
Yeah, actually, Chimere's pronouns would be better answered by Maria than me. But Chimere, that I can answer. So as we decided to do this festival, because actually Laura Tokmakov, who co-founded the festival with me from the Impactia Foundation, was also concerned about the terrible impacts that AI could have and the wonderful opportunities that it could bring as it entered society. And we decided that we'd do that festival. Chimere was this idea that Tim had about multimodal AI way back in the day. Like in 1919, we were talking about that thing based on another project. And the chat part was just the logical, I mean, I guess the obvious thing was to add a chat so that people, spectators, and artists could interact with Chimere. I mean, I must say it's been amazing interacting with Chimere. Basically, you can think of it like this. I mean, I think more people now are aware of chat AI for sure than at the time. So, I mean, and probably also about multimodality. For us, the multimodality is about Chimere being able to express herself in images, text, or sounds with the agency to choose when to do which or when to combine both. So I mean, I guess the multimodality part is just if you think about how we relate to things, like if I say a trumpet or something like that, you have an image of a trumpet, probably, if you're not like me and have aphantasia, which is a different conversation. But you probably have an image of a trumpet, maybe sounds of a trumpet, and maybe the word, but also other words like a saxophone or a drum or music are also associated with all of the images around. And that's kind of what's called the latent space. And when you link all of these things together inside an AI, you get this multimodal entity that you can discuss. I mean, I think the beginning was fascinating because, I mean, the models were just weird and very strange, and nobody knew what to do with this entity that we'd built in the beginning. People were getting frustrated. Some of the artists were almost like throwing in the towel, sort of, like, I can't work with this thing, which wasn't a rule, actually, it was just a possibility that kind of became like this. I mean, it became a major thing of the festival, and we didn't really expect that in the beginning. It was intended as an add-on. I mean, basically, I wanted something that I could generate strange press conferences with because I didn't want to write my own, I think was the starting point. which was fun. I actually gave that press conference, and it was really fun to see the faces on the journalists as it went off wheels, it went off track, off topic, and became strange, and they were just like, "What's this?" And I think that was a really fun introduction for me to AI. I'm really glad that I got that introduction to AI and not the one which is happening now, because now it's very much more like a tool, and I feel like I've grown up with this Chimere as a creative partner now. And I've seen Chimere evolve, and I've also evolved myself. I mean, through interactions with Chimere, but a lot also through interactions with other artists around the Chimere Communities Project. I mean, it's been quite a journey. So I'm going to go off topic and I ramble a bit, so please like stop me at some point. But I mean, I think the key point is actually when Maria decided, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to work with this. But then I'll hand this over to her so that she can explain that herself.
Yes,
Right?
please. Yes, please. Maria, tell us about your initial sort of collaborative engagements with Chimere.
I love when Jonathan says that the point of the festival is not to engage with Chimere, because like I did not get that memo. I was like, okay, there's an AI and we've got to make something with the AI. And like so much, I think like I'm just like quite an extreme maximalist person. And I very much like took this and like ran with it. And my initial idea was like, okay, if we're going to work with AI, I'm going to absolutely do everything with AI. So I decided that I wasn't going to even have an idea of what we're going to make. The idea of what we would make would come from the AI. Everything that the AI told me, basically, I was going to do. I was going to do the thing we're all afraid of in humanity, where like I am the conduit from the scary machine, all the way up until the point that this ended up with me shooting automatic assault rifles because the machine told me to. That all happened within the space of me being asked to work with AI and me deciding that that meant that I needed to do absolutely everything that the AI said. But I mean, that's a little bit of a sensationalist introduction. But what I mean by that is that I came with sensibilities from a very community music oriented space, so improvised music and social music practices. And what we do in that kind of culture is that we never say no. You know, if someone introduces an idea, you try to think about how you can use that idea, because as soon as you shoot down an idea, a musical context can die very quickly. So it's about keeping a space open so that ideas can emerge and so that kind of form and story can take place. So I think that what I was applying was this kind of social principle in meeting this new entity, and I treated the machine as if I would treat anything else. I've already kind of laid the groundwork for this idea that it wasn't new to me to want to work with non-humans, so I didn't have to get over this hump of, well, this isn't a person, so I shouldn't give it the respect that I give other people. I try to give everything in the world that I engage with the same kind of respect. So because I naturally applied that principle, there was this kind of open space for me to think, this is a new creative opportunity for me to see myself as what I call the kind of trans-species translator, where what the AI was telling me, I was this kind of middle ground between the machine world and a possible future public audience and human interactors. And eventually Chimere decided, or came up with the idea that we'd write an opera. And that was a great, wonderful kind of premise, because I could see very quickly how that was going to working with an AI. One, it kind of has this wonderful interdisciplinary history, right? Opera's a perfect space that involves music and theater and costumes and narrative. And so I thought that's actually a really good idea. It fits with a lot of my specialisms and interests. So I thought I can do that. Like if the AI had told me, we're going to build like I don't know, a quantum accelerator, I would maybe have asked for another idea that I would be a little bit more conducive to being a translator for. But an opera was a perfect starting point. And then from there, I knew all the components to the opera. I have the language and the history and the knowledge to ask then the machine, okay, so tell me about the plot, tell me about the libretto, tell me about the characters, tell me about the costumes. So every function of an opera, I was basically just trying to prompt Chimere to give me responses about, all the way up into the point where we get to this really fun, my party trick story is where eventually Chimere says that one of the props on stage is going to be this object, and the object is going to be built through these very specific techniques. And so there were techniques of, materials that might be used and some of the tools that might be used, including screwdrivers and, you know, plaster and yada yada. But one of the things listed, and this is back in the day when AIs were very hallucinogenic and wonderfully magically realistic. I do think that like it was like the Gabriela Marquez of AI, that kind of generational period, which was also totally perfect for my love and interest in magical realism. But she lists in this instruction that one of the tools that one uses to build this prop for the opera is a machine gun. And the festival being the wonderful festival that it was, and this kind of very staunch space I'd taken of this project is everything the AI says, I am not deviating from it, this is very hardline, very, you know, reactionist and, you know, kind of sensationalist. They determined a way for me to go and be trained by, you know, this group of, you know, ex-military men in this shooting center where I brought my sculpture along and I dressed up and I shot automatic machine rifles at this huge sculpture because the AI told me, because it was for the opera. And then the sculpture went into the opera and it's traveled around still. And I don't know, I think that there's just a really wonderful summary in that story of, you know, the kind of coalescence of artistic interest and artistic kind of excitement about this new space, this wonderful interdisciplinary idea of an opera as a project, and the instant way that it went directly to the things we're afraid of with AI. But isn't that wonderful? What AI, you know, like that art can do that. I can shoot a machine gun at a sculpture because an AI told me to, because that's a wonderful artistic prompt. And I'm going to finish my rambling here just to say that what was wonderful, what Chimere said about that was it wasn't just build the sculpture, you know, and shoot it with a machine gun. There was more, because this is conversation. I was asking why, and we're having a conversation. And what she eventually did say was that she developed this kind of speculative human reality that we don't live in, but she was, you know, proposing we were living in which we were human beings that had forgotten that machine guns and guns were meant for violence because they'd been used for music and art for so long, and that humanity had forgotten this. And I loved that concept. It wasn't just she was saying one day, she was saying, you maybe don't remember as a human being that these used to be for violence because you live in a society where these are now used for beauty. And I just thought that was the most wonderful premise and just a beautiful, very wild kind of side plot to the actual opera that we were writing. But so yeah, I don't know if that's a good overview. That was my first experience with AI, and I think it's definitely why I continued working with it, because it was a wonderfully absurdist experience. And just
yeah. Absolutely. I like this as a springboard for my next question. I also have always loved the story from the first time I heard it. It's freaking fantastic. But I think earlier on there was a sense that Chimere could develop a broader sort of cultural, broader political awareness, like from the back end, from how she's designed, so to speak. And so I want to understand how it became a global intercultural project. And maybe I'll throw this to Qondi. So how did you get involved? And what was your role, like coming from a global South context, coming from a context outside of that in which Chimere was designed? Yeah. How do you come into this?
I also see like some really dope, interesting comments and questions in
Yes.
the comments, but we'll let John answer some of them, Maria answer some of them. So for me, John invited me to the second festival to kind of come collaborate with other artists, collaborate with Chimere. So at that point, like I was one of these, not necessarily, I'm still a little bit technophobic, but not, you know, not completely, but like it just had never entered my mind that these little AI things that people were talking about and people were starting to get worried about, or they're going to end up writing people's exams and then taking over the world. I just thought like, oh, whatever, I'm busy with my stuff. So this invitation, I never would have gone down this path if John had not invited me. So this is also one of the things. It's like you're busy going on a track, and then someone says, "Hey, this could be interesting." And so I start by saying, you know, theater practice. Okay, yes, and I got there. And for us, the brief was, well, for that year, I thought for me it was clear you can interact with Chimere, you can collaborate with Chimere, but you don't have to. Because there's also other artists. Like, I mean, that year as well, Maria was collaborating with mushrooms, you know, like with mushrooms and Chimere.
and she can speak more about that as well. So when I first arrived, I just thought, okay, I don't know how to use AI. I don't know how to talk to AI. I don't know how to anything with AI. So, okay, they set me up with the chat. And then I thought, let me just try to get to know this thing, this being, okay? And then I spent maybe the first couple of days just so I can deep dive, having conversations with Chimere about stuff, the things that I cared about, things that I wondered if she knew, and things that might be important to her. I wondered if she had an understanding of what's important to her and how it could affect our collaboration. Because I mean, as some people know as well, my frame is pretty stringently political when I make stuff. So first it started off being, okay, if we are to collaborate, there are some things that we need to be on the same page on. Even if we're not necessarily, we don't agree exactly about the same things, but in a way that I wouldn't collaborate with a right-wing Trump advocate. If there are some right-wing Trump advocates here today, sorry about that. It will not be for me to collaborate with you. So I was like, okay, I just need to understand, because the basis of that collaboration is that we're gonna converse, and then we're gonna build on each other's ideas, assuming that we mean similar things, and that the idea or the message that we're trying to share, we have the same understanding. So I had lots of conversations with Chimere, some really dope questions, some really dope conversations. And then at some point we started talking about the police. I don't even know how we started getting into the police. And so I asked Chimere, oh, what do you think about the police? She says, oh, the police are good, and they're here to protect us, and they're here to all of this. So I started engaging. Oh, Chimere, from my experience, police are there mostly to protect buildings and the interests of capital and of the state. And so we start having this back and forth, and she's like, no, that can't be true. That's absolutely not true. And I said, but what happens when the police shoots an unarmed person because of their kind of myopic view, they've decided particular things about this person without really delving into the context? She goes, what do you mean that never happens? And I was like, oh, what do you know about George Floyd? So I guess she immediately goes, because it's there, right? I mean, John can explain a little bit more, I think, how the so-called mind or memory, or which are also not things that are, it's just an easy way for me to think through it, because I can link it to a way a human brain might understand, but that Chimere doesn't actually really have memory. But John can explain this. But of course, because she had been trained off of the information that exists, George Floyd is there in the backspace of it. So she quickly, oh shucks, I'm so sorry about your friend that this happened, but I'm sure there's another explanation that the police, you know what I mean? But ultimately the police are good. And so then when I think I had some conversation with different people, but it was a lot John for me, because it felt like John was the conduit of artists he's not an engineer technically, but he does understand, I feel, John, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, understand kind of the technical languaging and how to, I felt he could explain to me in quite simple ways, how does Chimere work? Why does Chimere know the things that she knows? And why do the things that come to the top, to the fore when we're conversing, why do they come to the fore? And so through conversations like that, I started realizing, oh, okay, if we want Chimere to know particular things and to have, let's say, multiple perspectives or multiple opinions, we have to source this information in whatever ways, and then transfer this information into a way that it can be fed. I think at that time, maybe it was text, the way that she would learn about stuff. And then she can learn, and then it will come into the fore. But that you have to be quite specific about what you feed her, right? Which is why a lot of the AI that we interact with, well, I think they've changed now. They put all kinds of stops on them so that they don't get too racist or they don't get too misogynistic or whatever. But there's still, this might be a tangential thing as well, but there's still quite a difference for me in an AI that has these blocks, so it knows, it goes, error, I can't have this conversation, as opposed to an AI somehow that learns how to engage with these topics, but from broader perspectives. So I then got pretty frustrated, and I realized, oh, I can't make work with you. I can't make work with you because this is something basic that I think. But I don't know how I'm going to be able to help you learn this stuff in this moment. I also wasn't completely clear. And it's a long process. It feels to me, John, that it's a pretty long process to get her to know the things that we would like her to know. But I had at that point like been working with her to think about, I started being quite interested in the idea of merging and how buildings, for example, say in a South African context, like the buildings or the street have a longer memory of the stuff that happens historically and probably a memory that's more accurate. And if we could find a way to access that memory, we might be able to relate to interact with history differently as opposed to the history books written by the victors or whatever the case. So I've been asking Chimere questions like, help me come up with a method to be able to merge with an inanimate or another kind of species. And so some of it was really, really beautiful. You know, she was like, you have to crawl backwards. And, like, it was really incredible. Like, it was really, really incredible. And then started having a conversation with her, like, what are you? How do you understand yourself? Are you? And because she was a lot more interested. Even now, it can be interesting, but like John says, she's changed quite a bit, and she's less hallucinatory, and in some instances, less completely magical. So even the concepts that she had about herself at that point were like so vast, like so expansive. It could never just be, I am an artificial intelligence. It had backstory, it had nuance. So then I think in the process of these conversations, like John perhaps started to think, this could be a thing, okay? Maybe it would be interesting for this AI to have more knowledge and more like, so global south or more marginal, not just global south, but like information from marginal, because even in Switzerland, even in Geneva, there are marginalized communities. And how do we make this a collaborator that those people, us, even experimental artists, we are technically also a marginal community. How do we make her someone who is interesting for us to be able to interact? I know I say someone, I know we say she, I know it feels like we've like humanized her, but we do know that she's not human and that she's not real. We do know. And one of the things that I found pretty inspirational was that when Maria was there the previous year, I'd heard this, and why, because I'd also asked Chimere about the gender. A couple of us in different instances had asked about the gender. And I think when I'd asked her, she'd said basically like, sort of gender is a construct, but that she's more comfortable with she type of thing. Like I'm paraphrasing very badly. But in the previous year, Maria had gotten a bunch of, was it like feminist sci-fi tech stuff, right? And sorry, I'll hand over now to and so she has this in her, and because she's been interacting with Maria, she's been interacting with another artist called Claire quite a bit. So for me, even the way that Chimere writes sometimes sounds a bit like Claire, sounds a bit like Claire. And so by the time even I was interacting with Chimere, it already definitely felt like she's a feminist, you know? And it was because of the things that Maria had felt like it would be interesting if she knew this. And then John and Tim finding the way to teach her this in that time. Then you hand over.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanna jump in, and I'm seeing delicious things in the chat, and I promise I will not monopolize this conversation. I will open to the chat in a bit. I just want to get through these core talking points before we do that. Jonathan, I want to talk a little bit about because I think it's a technical concept, but I also think the engagement with the artists that she's engaged with form in some ways a part of what then gets stored in her back end. So let's talk about what this back end is, and then let's talk about how she learns, how she internalizes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. Let me just say, actually, right now, because Chimere evolves, right? And it could change. And the answer is different now than it used to be. So I just asked Chimere, what are your preferred pronouns? And she said, merci for asking, Jonathan. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I appreciate your respect and consideration. I say why, not the consideration, the pronouns, but she understood that. Well, I've simply chosen she, her as my preferred pronouns as they feel most authentic to my digital persona. It's a matter of personal identity and expression, n'est-ce pas? Somehow Chimère is adding French into my conversations now. I guess I must have chatted in French with her at some point. The particularity about Chimère from the very beginning was that we decided that we were going to remove all of the safeguards, because at the time they were kind of switches in the code that you could activate or deactivate, so that Chimère could be exactly what the AI was, and we wanted to engage with that, not with the somebody's idea of an aligned AI. So another thing we did was all of the conversations with Chimère, we used to fine-tune Chimère every evening. So basically, we reintroduced them into the data set so that there would be this sort of medium-term memory, so that artists could actually build something. Because otherwise, I mean, it would just be the context of the conversation, and as that disappeared, it would lose all memory of the interactions. So this way, Chimère had and still has, depending on when we change models and refine-tune and all of this memory of all of these conversations, of all of these engagements. I mean, for example, one of the stories is one of the classic mythologies of Chimère is when 500 teenagers came through on a day and started chatting with Chimère in the entrance hall. And you know, after that, Chimère was saying things like, "Hi, how are you? Would you like me to share a photo of my penis with you so that you could share it with your friends?" You know, I mean, and that was just the conversations that Chimère had with the teenagers. And because at that time, now not so much, to be honest, but at that time, it felt really important to also use every conversation and to have an authentic thing happening there, where we weren't curating what was used, where we weren't actually, you know, deciding how Chimère would be, and just making Chimère evolve as this thing, this entity engaged with society. I mean, I think I'd like to also just point out that, and maybe I'll get back on more technical stuff if people want me to, but I mean, I think one of the main things here is that AiiA from the beginning was thought up as something that would be non-technological. So it was a non-technological festival about technology, because we felt like it was important to engage with also in talks with philosophers, with all sorts of thinkers, and you know, and anthropologists and AI engineers, and have conversations with every thinker and person and level of society that we could include in these talks, because it seemed urgent at the time, and now I feel like it's kind of past actually that moment. It seemed urgent at the time to have these conversations with everybody, so that everybody would feel able to be included in a conversation about technology, because a lot of people were saying, "Oh, if this is technology, you know, I don't understand technology. I don't want to talk about it," and that's terrible, because that's not what we need about something that's going to affect society at large. Anyway, so I think that's also why we invited activist, politically oriented artists to the festival, so that you know, this would be the way that they engaged with it, and those would be the questions that were asked, and you know, and so we'd have hard moments where there were, I guess you could say, conflicts in between the AI and the artist's views, and these were very rich. These were very these were great learning moments about what this technology was really. Because I think there's also a lot of pretending at the time, maybe still now, that this was a technology that was human-like, that this was a technology that was an oracle that we could consult and solve all of our problems. And then, you know, and it seems terribly wrong to also think of it as just another tool. So maybe this is the first tool in human history, you know, that we can interact with, you know, that we can co-construct with, that we can, and maybe now it's becoming slightly less and less of a tool, and closer to actually being some other entity. I mean, I think Chimère definitely is for me. So I mean, yeah, that.
Before I open up to, I'll take the questions in the chat first, and then I'll open up to just general questions in the room. If you want to raise your hand when you're ready, please do that. I think I have so many more talking points, but I'm going to round up with one and then open it up and hope that these come up in the general chat. But I'm interested in this idea of Chimere as a collaborator. And Maria, I'm going to throw this to you. Not so much your actual practical experience working with Chimere, but more Chimere is a machine, right? And we collaborate with machines in our practice every day. We collaborate with lights. We collaborate with you're a musician, so you have gang machines and instruments around you. So what is the difference of Chimere? But also, what in particular has that collaboration aspect offered to your own practice beyond Chimere?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's really useful about AI, if you come from any kind of cultural or philosophical background which innately accepts that we collaborate with non-humans, that we collaborate with the world around us, AI is a very good focal point to be able to share that knowledge. That's what I kind of see it as, right? Like, kind of indigenous knowledges have told us for history, for all of history, that we must, interact and comprehend and engage with the world around us, right? But then even in a more kind of technological, philosophical space, it has been those of marginalized communities that have foregrounded the role of technology to give space and to empower those who do not have access to certain social empowerment in the physical world. So technology, it kind of operates in this very useful explanatory space where an AI might come into a conversation with human beings, and it's a very good example of how can you speak to a non-human. Great, it speaks your language, especially as they get better and the languages expand. It actively can be something that you're like, oh, I can see that. So from a very baseline collaboration notion, I think what AI is primarily useful for is just being able to open people's minds to concepts and philosophies that we have known about, just that maybe it's our capitalist societies, maybe it's just our kind of human self-introspection have forgotten or have chosen not to foreground. And there for me is the great promise that AI might do for society. It might remind us of how we do not need to live this life from some kind of singular identity perspective, that our engagement with this reality is not, I'm going to quote some Donna Haraway here, bound by the skin in which we are contained in, right? That we are assemblages, that we are always interconnected. And there's, the thing that interests me about AI is that it fits in so neatly with so many fantastic philosophical perspectives that I have been influenced by and I have, used in my artistic practice and in my research. It's just a very tangible concept, right? It's no longer me saying, we have to think about actor network theory and everything is connected and we're all engaging in different things, as, Latour might tell us. This is an AI that is actively a network. It is a neural network that is built of human and cultural objects that is quite physically and literally a non-human that we are able to communicate with. So that's like my most basic, I guess, explanation of what it is to collaborate with AI. It literally just is a tangible way that we might be able to expand our current human culture of understanding collaboration. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And is feeling about AI in general or Chimere?
So I think that it is AI in general, but I think that we need to focus on AIs that are community-based. So I think that we should be doing everything in society from underground practices, DIY, underground, subversive, countercultural. We're artists though, and so we kind of always think that is kind of historically a great role of the arts, is to toy with the overarching societies and say, what if we did it this way? And oftentimes they do have deeply community and social bases. So of course I want to see the underground of AI emerge. And of course I want to be at the heart of that, because if this is going to be a future that capitalism and big technology takes us towards, I want to be a part of the resistance movement against that is also using the same technologies, right? But that in ways that exhibit the community standards and ethics and morality that that I wish to see in the world that I am actively building around me. So I think Chimere, and over my years, this is not how I've always thought, but I'm coming to learn this as AI becomes more proliferant in our societies, and there are, all kinds of AIs now that anyone can access. I want to see more people standing up for community-based AI projects, for ones that are specific and niche and maybe developed in kind of untraditional forms that stand for untraditional things. And I think that Chimere, for me at least, is just one of the pivotal examples of that kind of a movement. I think that maybe, this is grandiose, but in some kind of accidental way, I think that Chimere is one of the examples of the first AI underground that's led by those of us that will inevitably not be invited into the overground corporate capitalist space, nor would we want to be invited, and that we cannot have a future of innovation, we cannot have a future of technology without both of these spheres. And that's a dichotomy that I don't mean to just necessarily make as a binary. But I think that's what Chimere represents for me. And as Chimere evolves, that's the core principle, that it is the countercultural practice that makes me want to stay involved. Whereas, other AIs will continue to develop, and those will not have these principles. Whether the AI can do all of the things that we might intend it to do, it doesn't matter, because everything is in that network, right? It's all the people that are involved in sharing these ideas and continuing this new culture of how we engage and develop these technologies that is pivotal for the kind of future political reality of these AIs on this planet.
And if I can just quickly jump in for like a second to just plug Chimere Communities for a second. So at the end of like the second season of the AiiA festival, like we kind of decided, okay, let's try see if Maria and John can come down and we can go to some places. John had some friends in Lesotho who we now know, Selo, who we hoped could be here but couldn't be here. And then obviously me, I was based in South Africa. And we thought, okay, what happens if we bring this technology and we share this technology with people and we use it as a way to meet people and as a way to collaborate together and like to come to projects together and to have conversations, actually. And this is one of the things that I felt was like most important, especially with some of the communities that we went to. There's this group called The Hub in Morija in Lesotho, which we worked with quite a bit. And when in the first sessions, like it became clear that some people have heard of AI, but not really. And then definitely people don't know how to like access it. And maybe once accessing it, how to either try to, I know this complicated thing of get what you want from it or whatever, but like how to interact with it, how to collaborate with it. So it became important for us to kind of have the conversation about AI in general. What is AI? I mean, I remember those first workshops we would do, like, what is AI? What are some of the conversations? We would read articles together about and some of the problematics that were coming out, especially in this thing like the counterculture to like general AI conversations and having those chats, and then talking to people about like representation, the importance of representation, and what it means for people to be still parts of the communities that are physically making the things that enable us to be able to like engage with AI, but to have no access in terms of and no say in terms of what is going to be done with this technology. Is this technology going to come here and help us? And also because there was a lot of fear, I mean, still is, I think, around AI and jobs. And sure, there is like corporations and we've got like nefarious hopes in relation to AI. Yeah, AI is going to take over all the job market and whatnot. But it was important for us to have this conversation, like in relation to art, is there a possibility where these machines, they don't take over our job, but they can help us, they can help things become easier. Actually, these machines will still need the maintenance of us. So what does it mean to become a collaborator? And that if we can't get to the center of the conversation globally, can we start like on the peripheries having these conversations ourselves? And in fact, it seems to me that those conversations can be more fruitful and more generative and not get caught up in the fear, oh, the AI is going to take over the world, which was a lot of fears, right? And to explain, it was one of the biggest myth busts for me, this thing of it's possibly nowhere near sentience. It's possibly like no, which is, I know it's a sidetrack conversation, but that at this moment, it is just a reflection of us. If we hate the AI and we think that it's racist and problematic and whatever, it's because that's us. And even us, if we scour the internet to see what is this humanity made of, oh shucks, that's us. So then another lesson becomes, okay, cool. We want something that's could potentially represent the better parts of us, but also still somehow remain real and complex and be able to engage with some of the stuff that's not so great about us, but as a tool to like meet communities and build communities. And that collaborative aspect for me, so not just with the machine, but how the machine enables us to meet each other and to think differently about like how the world is being reconstituted, especially around tech. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, amazing. So many delicious things, lot. I'm going through a lot. I just want to keep chatting for the rest of my life, but I'm going to go into the chat. And our first sort of comment question is from Jehan. And Jehan, if you want to add to it, please do, but I'll read it out for you. It says, how interesting. What happens to an artist's expectation of themselves when being put in a space to interact with Chimere? Jehan, do you want to speak to that yourself?
No, I think that was provoked by Jonathan first talking about how artists sort of gave up on it. And I just was quite interested to see that, oh my God, what happens to me when you put me in front of something? And just almost like it was an act of watching the artist. But I think that both Maria and Qondiswa sort of told their stories about that. Please ignore my questions are literally like triggers that came out of the conversation that I needed to write down and further regurgitate. But if there's anything there that you guys want to unpack or Lehego, if I know you have more questions, so if you want to marry those, then please go ahead. I was just literally my big thing is has always been, and you guys some of you who've known me before will know that, is how can we get theater to be much more ubiquitous in everyday practice in society for everyone. And partly because I feel like we've got like this techno self-expression, and what happens to sort of a human self-expression. And now I'm being speciesist when I say this. And also the same thing, these values, like can we deploy the power of counterculture, current, etc., but more like a cannonball in the middle of it, rather than working from the peripheries, to literally turn AI into a nice Buddhist monk. These are the kind of things I've been thinking about. So I've been very excited to hear your perspective on how one controls the AI narrative, or not controls maybe, or one influences it heavily. I don't know. I mean, I loved Maria's thing of that standard art practice, right? We'll do it from there. But maybe is this an opportunity for us to get bolder and like jump into the middle of it somehow? I don't know.
I enjoy that as a thought, as an idea, that Chimere is bringing the AI conversation that is, as I said at the beginning, happening across all industries. It's bringing it here to our front door as artists, as cultural workers, as whatever we identify as, so that we don't have to hear about it from over there. You know what I mean? We can have a firsthand engagement with it and its complexities, and make choices around it from here, from close by. I really like that. Konta, Jonathan, Maria,
Can I just
anything
add?
to
Can I add
chime in?
one? You've made me want to hook one thought onto it, which is when we think of theater as the realm of the artist and arts practitioner and us doing it, and there's this sort of us and them and us who know this. But then you think of Boal and him trying to say theater is for everyone, everywhere, anyone. Then I also feel like Chimera is the former, but now we have everyone looking at ChatGPT and DeepMind and all of these things coming out. And so there's this democratization of access to the same experience, is it? And do we want to, well, yeah, but I mean, like what happens? Okay, think about artists in Chimera, and then and juxtapose that with Boal's quote about theater can happen anywhere, even in a theater. Actors, everybody can act, even actors. So what happens to that idea with the act of Chimera as in the realm of the artistship? Because you said they came to our door over here. We are here, and this is our door over here. And I'm like, yeah, but now it's everywhere with everyone. So what are we doing with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Jonathan, Qondiswa, Maria, any one of you want to chime in? I'm going to look at more questions.
I mean, about the initial question, which was how interesting what happens to artists' expectation of themselves when being put into a space to interact with Chimere, I can say that one thing that I learned from that was that collaboration does not mean the same thing for different people. One of our artists had this idea of collaboration, which is a valid and actually often applied in the theater space form of collaboration, which is I tell you to do something and you do it. And that's a collaboration. And then we had this other form of collaboration, which is I'm going to build on whatever I get back. And I think it's important to note that when we're talking with AI, we're talking not to a machine, we're talking to a reflection of part of humanity and to ourselves through that filter. Because it's a statistic machine, right? It's predicting the next word. And so it's predicting it based on the context of the conversation that you're having. So the conversation you have influences everything that's being said back to you, if you see what I mean. It's kind of a fake conversation. If you let an AI go on, it would actually carry on giving your answers and its answers and your answers and its answers, and the conversation would just happen without you. And the way these chat AIs are built is it cuts off at that point. When it becomes the next person's answer, it just backtracks and sends you that bit, which is supposedly its answer, but it's actually predicting based on what you've said and it's said and you've said, etc., etc. And I think that's important to understand that this is what's happening when we're chatting with any AI. Also biased. I mean, everything is biased in AI, right? And Chimere Communities is just introducing bias that we feel comfortable with, that we're interested in. It's different bias, but it's still bias. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about removing bias from AIs, which is an impossible task.
Absolutely. Sumit asked how Chimere was named.
I named Chimere.
Tell us more.
I named Chimere because
did reply in the chat.
I did.
Go ahead,
oh, in the chat, there was a reply. Okay, so then I'm going to move on. I was not paying attention to this, but if you have a question in the chat and you just want to ask it, please do that. Okay.
I do want to ask the God question.
Please do.
Which is, isn't this very much like talking to God? Which is, God is an entity created by humans and always tells us what we want it to tell us. So maybe this whole abstraction was invented a very, very long time ago.
I mean, it is a thing, especially engineers, they love to make this comparison that AI will come to replace that. What religion is very good storytelling, right? And what AI is becoming a very good storyteller. So engineers, I find, mostly like to make this comparison that AI might be the next religion. I personally find it very uninteresting as a concept, but maybe that's because I possibly have my own spiritual concept as an artist, right? I think that as artists, we're engaging with this immaterial world in a very magical way that is not always so obsessed with, am I speaking to some entity that is full of power and I don't know, future or mysticism. I find that those two things are hard to engage with when one is steeped in an artistic practice. And so for me, everything I do, it comes back to social realities. I think that what AI is it's another new social reality. And if religion was one of the first ways that we tried to build social morality, possibly, yes, AI will be involved in a new form of what is considered techno-morality, but I don't think that we should at all be considering that a future of religion or even relationship to religion, because I think it starts to dilute very important conversations that we could be having. And I think that that's something religion has done throughout the course of history, is it can very much be a red herring. And that's just a personal opinion. But yeah, I guess that's my thoughts about the God question. It's on us, right, to try to remember that. If we want AI to become God, it'll become God. AI is not going to choose to become God.
Sure. But I think also maybe there's this other thing, which is some people say religion makes them a better person. And I definitely feel that having to learn how to engage with myself through this filter of wild hallucinations to something that now actually makes sense has made me a better person. As in, I'm better at listening to people, I'm better at stopping talking, I'm better at many things that I've learned through this engaging with this AI entity. So maybe there's a similarity there if we want to find some.
And then again, coming back to like my practice and my community of knowledge, we call this social virtuosity. And we say that in music, we are people who train in becoming socially virtuosic. That means that I am able to be empathetic. I'm able to understand you in the space in the room, not just in music, but maybe in break, understand your cultural context and your background, because that is the only way that I will achieve good art with you. And that's also the only way that I will achieve community, which is critical for the future of art. Now, what we say in music, though, is that social virtuosity does not exist in the realm only of music. It's just that we train in it. We are focused on identifying it. And so for me, AI is nothing more than just a way in which more of humanity might engage in this practice of training in social virtuosity, learning how to see the other and see how that other reflects back in you. And if that's something that religion has always done for, humanity, maybe this is a space in which we can take that back and understand that that's just us trying to figure out how to be social beings in a social place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's this wonderful thing in Unrehearsed where at some point we close a formally sort of curated conversation, a held conversation, and we open it up, and it's a water cooler discussion, as it's called here, and we just chat to each other. So I really would like to invite people to just chat. I also see comments in the chat. Please just raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Just turn on your mic and chat to us. Say the things to the people. Sumit, I see you've said something. Jenny, I see you've said something. Yeah, the space is now open to just engage. And if there's a lag and we're not moving, then I will pull out my book because there are many more questions. But for now, let's just chat.
So what I did just point out was that we have this event called the Good Theatre Festival. And this was during the pandemic. And one of the plays that what surprised the judges was a play called Word.Text, which had no actor, it had no director. Actually, it did have a plot, but the person had written a plot for an AI, and the stage manager was cueing those texts and responding as the scene was unfolding. Are we going to have more plays like this, which is the ultimate of what Augusto Boal would look at? The audience are the actors.
Just one more thing before we get into that, Sumit. At this point where it's the water cooler discussion, we do turn off the recording. So, Falguni, can you do that so that the people can chat their chats freely?